The Senzo Meyiwa murder trial resumes on Monday. It was postponed after State Witness Sergeant Thabo Mosia fell ill this morning. Proceedings began with an application brought by the four of the accused to have the matter halted. Advocate Malesela Teffo told the court that his clients had been brought before an open court without having had their rights read to them. However, the North Gauteng High Court dismissed the application. Advocate for the fifth accused, Zandile Mshololo, continued cross-examining forensic officer Sergeant Mosia. He was the first official on the scene to collect evidence. Mshololo suggested that Mosia failed in his duties after he told the court that he failed to take certain fingerprints and DNA swabs from the Vosloorus home of singer Kelly Khumalo's mom. Meyiwa was shot there in 2014 with 7 people present. Mosia told the court that he didn't retrieve gunshot residue from any of those in the home, neither did he interview them. Legal analyst Zola Majavu joins me now to look at the major moments in a trial that continues to enthrall South Africans hungry for answers. Zola, thank you for your time tonight. The theories were flying left and right about whether these are the right suspects. There was criticism of police work and the rise of the star power of the 2 defense attorneys, Malesela Teffo and Zandile Mshololo. Let's start with the trial evidence itself. Right at the outset, this bold assertion by Teffo that it was allegedly songstress Kelly Khumalo that pulled the trigger. Your thoughts?
Good evening, Iman, and good evening to the viewers at home. Firstly, we are still at the very early stages of this trial. I can assure you that it is going to be a marathon trial, watching by the pace at which the matter is progressing. You are still busy with witness number 1, and almost a week has gone past. But having said that, look, as lawyers, we are creation of our clients' instructions and we employ different strategies. So far, the bulk of the attack seems to be aimed at discrediting, and maybe correctly so, the evidence tendered by a witness who was one of the first to respond to the scene as a scene of crime manager. There are standard operation procedures that dictate how a person such as Sergeant Mosia ought to have handled the crime scene. And the bulk of the cross-examination, especially by Advocate Zandile Mshololo, was aimed at pointing out the shoddiness or the tardiness with which he executed his duties. The idea behind that is obviously to demonstrate that nothing credible can flow from an otherwise discredited process. Whether or not they have achieved or they've made significant inroads is still too early to tell, but I think in fairness to Advocate Mshololo, she seems to be poking what I regard as significant holes aimed at justifying her theory, because if they can discredit the first witness, chances are subsequent witnesses may already be on poor footing. Now, the strategies that we have seen employed by Advocate Teffo, while I respect him immensely, I think he has a tendency to raise issues at the most inopportune moments. And I'll give you an example. The first example was when he put to a witness who had not implicated his clients directly in terms of who pulled the trigger, what type of ammunition was used. Remember, Sergeant Mosia came to the scene after the fact. So it does not assist him or his case if he puts a version of a direct eyewitness to a person who came after the fact, because all Sergeant Mosia would do is to say, I don't know, or I'm in no position to admit or deny. So that for me was really something that was totally inopportune, and a lot of time was wasted just on that. The second issue was when he sought to bring an application to halt the proceedings. I've never heard of that type of application, but let's deal with it for what it is. It was at the stanza of the proceedings after he had finished his cross-examination that lasted about a day or so. Advocate Mshololo had not finished, so it was still her time on behalf of accused number 5 to continue with her cross-examination. And I found it strange that Advocate Teffo would stand up and say what he said, and most importantly, say that a continuation by his co-defense counsel of a cross-examination that she is perfectly entitled to do would be futile. It's not his point. It was, with respect, not his call to make, and that wasted time. Secondly, he then sought to bring an application to deal with a confession in a trial within a trial. Now, for the benefit of the listeners, what we are busy with is called the main trial, right? Now, if there were to be the issue about the admissibility of a confession, that is something that gets handled in a mini trial alongside the main trial, and it is called a trial within a trial. But it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It must be triggered by the state's attempt to tender into evidence an admission or a confession. At this point, the state had not even indicated that it will rely on a confession, firstly. Secondly, he should have waited for the state to tender that evidence before he could object and bring an application for a trial within a trial. The state was nowhere next to that because Advocate Mshololo had still not completed her cross-examination, which, upon completion, can be followed by a re-examination by Advocate Baloyi on behalf of the state. Only once re-examination has been completed, Advocate Baloyi would then indicate who his next witness would be. And that witness, if, for example, is going to be a witness who supposedly made a confession that the state wants to rely upon, that is the trigger I am referring to. And that is the trigger that would have then warranted both Advocates Mshololo or Teffo, depending on who has made a particular confession. So we're not even there. So that particular application at that moment was inopportune. And I say this with humility, but with the firmness of conviction. It was simply, offside in footballing parlance. It was offside.
Gonna have to leave it there because I'll be offside if I don't end our interview now because we're out of time. Zola Majavu, thank you for your thoughts and your insights, talking there about both figurative and literal triggers. How is it all going to play out in this trial that has certainly impaled the interest of our country?